Hi friend, and welcome back. It is finally fall and I have been so ready for this. So I've decorated a little bit, but I've also found an amazing recipe that is perfect for a cool fall day. It's a French recipe that I found, and it's called Veloute de Legumes, which in English just means vegetable soup. But this is a very creamy vegetable soup, and it's perfect for fall. But first, I'm going to attempt to make French baguettes. Now, I've never made these before, so you'll get to go along with me and see if this actually turns out. So in the bowl here, I have already put in 3 cups of all-purpose flour, and I'm adding 1.5 teaspoons of fine sea salt and 1.5 teaspoons of instant yeast. And then I'll just mix that in together. Now in the measuring cup, I have warm water that I've heated in the microwave. The recipe says to bring that water to 110 degrees Fahrenheit up to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. So I did microwave that, and my digital thermometer, the battery was dead in it. So I'm just using my candy thermometer in there to make sure that the water's not too hot. And you want to make sure the water isn't too hot because it will kill the yeast and your bread won't rise. So we're going to add that water to the dry mixture and just stir that around. Now this doesn't take very long. This process is really easy, but this bread actually will not be ready until tomorrow. So I'm going to mix this up, and then I will cover it with plastic wrap, and you'll see I'll poke a few holes in that, and it's going to sit at room temperature on the counter for a couple of hours. And at that point, I will put it into the refrigerator, and it's going to stay there overnight. And the recipe says you can actually leave the dough in the refrigerator for up to 5 days. So if this is something you want to make ahead, this is perfect. And this is a no knead French baguette. So really the only work you're doing is stirring that initial dough together and then letting it sit for a long time. And then, tomorrow we'll be forming the actual loaves. So I'm just oiling this bowl up with some olive oil. And then I'm going to transfer the batter from one bowl into that one, and it'll sit there for a couple of hours. Now this is a really sticky dough. I think if I make this again, I may try and adjust that a little bit just because it is super, super sticky. So I'm going to double wrap this. I'm going to put 2 layers on there. We just want to make sure that that dough doesn't have a chance to dry out while it's proofing. Okay, so I've set that aside to proof for a couple hours, and now I am starting on the Veloute de Legumes, the creamy vegetable soup. So we are starting with 1 large yellow onion, and we're going to just chop that roughly. This was probably more of a medium-sized onion, but I think that's going to be enough. Next up, we have 2 cloves of garlic, and we're going to mince those. And none of this has to be cut into too small of pieces, because we are going to blend this later. So we're just doing a rough chop on everything. I actually end up using 1 large garlic clove and then 2 smaller ones. Okay, so next we are using half of a butternut squash, and that's a little bit more than half, but it did say half of a medium, and I really wasn't sure if that would be considered a medium-sized butternut squash or not. Let me tell you, these are not that easy to peel and cut. It's a little bit tough going there, and it definitely doesn't slice through that easily. But we're going to do the same thing with this. We're just going to do a rough chop on this. Now, these seeds did not want to come out of this squash very easily. I ended up having to use the knife to loosen it up a little bit, but it wasn't quite as easy as scraping the seeds out of a pumpkin. All right, I'm digging out the big spoon. I've got the ice cream scooper, and it actually does work a little bit better. Although the more that I worked with these squash, the more slippery they became. Okay, so I have a rutabaga here, and actually the recipe calls for 3 to 4 small turnips, but I could not find turnips anywhere. I know they're more of a fall vegetable, and it's, just now fall, but I even went to Whole Foods and nothing. So I have substituted for a rutabaga. I would like to try this again with turnip though, because I know turnips, when they cook down, they have a sweet but kind of a nutty flavor, and rutabagas, when they cook down, have more of a potatoy flavor. I mean, they're sweet, but they're much more of a potato type consistency and taste when you cook them down. So I think I will try this again when I can find the turnips. Now it occurs to me here that I probably have enough rutabaga with what I've already diced, because the turnips really are just, the recipe calls for 7 ounces. So I don't need to cut the rest of that rutabaga up. And I definitely don't want to put more in of something that I'm not sure how it will affect the overall taste of the soup. So I'm just chopping half of a head of cauliflower here. And we'll do the same thing with that. We'll give it a rough chop. I've never made soup with cauliflower in it, so this should be interesting. The recipe calls for 1 large carrot. The carrots that I have, they weren't very large, so I just did a medium and then added another half of a small one to go with it. Okay, so I have my Dutch oven on there. It's been on medium heat. And I am going to add 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter into the pot and get that melted. So now I'm just adding the onion and the garlic. I'm going to stir that around in the butter a little bit, and we will let that cook for about 5 minutes. Okay, so after 5 minutes, we're going to add in all of the other vegetables. And then I'm just going to stir those up really well so it all sort of gets coated in that butter. And we are adding some salt and pepper there. It says to start out with a half a teaspoon of flaky sea salt and a half a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. And I mean, I do end up adding more to that, but that's what we're starting with. Now we're just stirring to coat. Now I'm adding 2 cups of vegetable broth, and you can add chicken broth if you want, but I had vegetables, so that's what I'm using. The recipe calls for either. And then next I'm going to add in 2 cups of 2% milk. Now at this point, the recipe does say to turn the burner up onto high until it comes to a boil. And at that point, you're going to turn the heat down to simmer and cook with it partially covered. So you want the lid slightly off the top of the pot. And you're going to let that simmer for about 30 minutes. At that point, the vegetables should be fairly soft. Okay, so I cooked that for 30 minutes and then I let it cool for a few minutes because you do not want this mixture spraying up at you when you take this immersion blender. You can pour the mixture into a regular blender, but I would suggest letting it cool even more if you're going to do that. So I'm just using the immersion blender here and I'm getting some of those big chunks, and then I'll just keep working at it until it's a nice smooth consistency. Okay, so we're gonna give this a first taste and see where we're at as far as seasoning. Now the soup is, I mean, it is super flavorful, but I do like my food a little bit more salty, so I added some more. And actually, by the time I'm finished with all of this, I've actually added probably another teaspoon or two to the soup. But it starts out perfect, so you can season to taste, and you can have as much or as little salt and pepper in it as you like. Now it is super thick, so I'm adding a little bit more broth. So I started out with 2 cups and then I added a little more there. And by the time I let it simmer for the rest of the afternoon, I actually ended up putting the rest of that broth in there. So I had a full 4 cups of broth in it by the time it was finished. But it still made a really nice thick bisque-like consistency. Okay, so we're gonna go get a clean spoon and we're gonna try this again. All right, now I'm going to plate this up. It does say if you want a little creamy or a little creamier consistency, you can add sour cream or you can add Greek yogurt. So I do have some Greek yogurt in a bag there. So I'm going to plate this up, and I have some bacon pieces I'm going to put in the middle just because I thought it sounded good. And you could really play around with this and do a lot of different things. I'm just kind of playing with the plating here. I've always liked the look of cream on top of soup, so I'm just experimenting here. I end up making a bit of a mess with it, but I mean, that's fine. You don't learn anything if you don't experiment. And the Greek yogurt really, really was a good addition to the soup, and so was the bacon. definitely a mess. I scooped up some for my son later and played around with it again, and it did look a little bit better. But it all tastes the same. All right, we're going to give this another taste test with the bacon and the Greek yogurt. And it really does elevate it. I mean, the soup itself is really good, but the bacon and the Greek yogurt really elevate it. And then next, I'm going to try a little bit of nutmeg, just a sprinkle of nutmeg on the top of it, and that elevates it even more. In fact, I end up actually putting just a pinch of nutmeg in the pot and stirring it around in there because I liked it so much. Yep, that's the perfect combination right there. I think we found it. All right, we are back to the next day, and we're going to finish up the bread that we started the day before. Now this dough has been sitting there all night, so I am just getting a piece of parchment paper out, and I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on there. And I'm going to use my plastic scraper to divide this dough in half, because this will make 2 baguettes. And this is not super easy because it is still a really, really sticky dough. As you will see here when I try to work with it. Now it says to sprinkle a little bit of flour on top, but yeah, I end up needing a few sprinkles, because as you can see, my rolling pin is just, it will not roll that. It is so sticky that the rolling pin really is not working. So it says to pat it out or roll it out to an 8x4 rectangle, which is pretty close to what I've done there. And it says to then roll it out again to an 8x4. So I'm just pressing it with my fingers. It just seems to be working better if I flour my fingers and then press it down. And then it says to actually fold it in half again. That's going to give you good layers and hopefully some good air pockets too in there. And then it says to press the seal, the 2 edges, press them down to seal that. And actually, I should have left it right there. And the final product is supposed to be about 2 by 12 inches. And I really kind of misunderstood there. And I have flattened this out. Now, I realize when I'm doing the second loaf, my mistake. And so I go back and I actually fold this one over on itself again and seal it. So it's more of a 2-inch wide loaf. Now it is too long, and that really shouldn't be more than 12 inches long. So yeah, I've made it a little bit too long, but this is my first try. So, you know, cook and learn. Now I'm putting that on the baking dish, and I'm just going to use a Just clean towel, and sprinkle a little bit on the top with flour so the towel doesn't stick to it. And that is actually going to go over on the counter for a couple of hours to prove again. So here is my second attempt, and this one goes a little bit smoother because I learned a little bit from that first try. Now, I've made bread before several times, but I've never made baguettes. And I've never used this recipe, so this is all pretty new. But the beauty of cooking is that once you do it and try it, every time you do it, you learn something new, and you get a little bit better at it. Still a little too sticky to use that rolling pin though. Okay, so we're doing the first fold over, and then we'll flatten it out again, and then we will do the second fold. Okay, this one's going to go on the baking sheet, and I'll sit it over there on the countertop, and that's going to also sit for a couple of hours to proof. That one's also just a little bit longer than actually it needed to be. Okay, so it's been a couple of hours. That has risen. These don't rise a whole lot, so I'll be interested to try them again and see how that works. But I'm using a razor blade to score these just diagonally on top. And then the recipe actually says to spritz water on the top, and my water bottle actually broke when I was trying to fill it up to use it for this recipe. So I just sprinkled some with my fingers. So we're gonna pop that into a preheated oven at 450 degrees, and that will actually bake for 30 minutes. Now the first loaf, I actually forgot to set a timer, so it cooked longer than it needed to. It didn't burn, and it tasted good. It was edible, but it definitely was a little bit darker than it needed to be. So I was sure on this loaf, I made sure to set the timer, and it did come out a little bit lighter. Now I think had I made these loaves the 12 inches long instead of a little bit longer, they would have had a little bit thicker consistency to them. And I'll definitely try that. But I mean, as far as baguettes go, these actually turned out really well. Now, the first one that was done a little bit more, the crust, you'll see I cut into it first. The crust is definitely, I mean, it's got a good crunch to it, but the inside is very airy, perfectly soft, and had a really great taste to it. So I'm happy with these for a first try. I will definitely make this recipe again now that I'm a little more experienced at it, but I'm really tickled with this. So just trying to cut a little piece off here to get a taste of it. But yeah, these ended up turning out really, really well. And the first loaf was gone within the first few hours after making it. So I think all in all, this has been a success, and this pairs really well with the creamy vegetable soup. So I'm excited about it. I'm happy with it, and I can't wait to do some more French cooking. So thanks for joining me today, and I hope you follow along for more videos. I will definitely be making a lot more fall videos. So thanks, and I will see you next time.